My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm a field investigator with the State Health Department. You asked me to record a narrative summary of the survey instead of just handing over the usual stack of forms and citations. So this is me trying to explain what the paperwork won't. This started, on my end, as a routine assignment. Mid-sized regional hospital, not a teaching facility, not a trauma center. It had a modest OR suite, a mixed med-surg floor, a small ICU. On paper, they were average. What flagged them was a cluster. A 4-month spike in surgical site infections, 2 anesthesia events described in language vague enough to make my teeth hurt, a whistleblower letter mentioning corrected paperwork, backup generator issues, and near-miss wrong site surgeries. That's enough to get my boss to slide a manila folder across my desk and say, "Go take a look." I've reviewed worse. At least I thought I had. You hear things before you see them in these places. On my first walkthrough, I didn't see anyone collapsing in hallways or blood dripping from ceiling tiles. That's TV. It's not how real hospitals feel. What I heard was a call light dinging steadily at the far end of a corridor while 3 nurses huddled at the station, trading off which patient was needy and which ones could wait. I heard an IV pump beeping in a room with the door half closed. No one inside. I heard a tech mutter, "We're underwater today," to the floor as he pushed an empty stretcher past me, eyes down. At the OR desk, I picked up the first anesthesia record from my stack. Photocopy, 2-hole punched. It felt wrong in my hands. Too clean. The pre-op checklist had one date. The intra-op note had another. The time anesthesia supposedly started was 7 minutes before the patient was even logged into the OR. I flipped to the second case. Same anesthesiologist, same handwriting. Identical closing sentence. Coarse, uneventful. In all my surveys, I've learned something. Real life is messy. When every note reads the same, it doesn't mean there were no problems. It means someone is editing. The official reason for my visit was an infection spike, so I started there. I pulled their infection control logs, compared them against their OR schedules, then against readmissions. A pattern popped almost immediately. Multiple post-op infections tied back to one OR, one scrub team, 1 week where the sterilizer logs were thin. "Where are the biological indicator results for that week?" I asked their infection prevention nurse. She shuffled through a binder. "We had some computer issues. IT thinks the interface glitched." "Biological indicators are paper," I said. Silence. "Then, I'll have to get back to you on that." She didn't. When I pressed her, there was a single sheet tucked into the back of the log. No signatures, a photocopied graph, the date handwritten in a different pen than the rest. In my line of work, you learn to read absence as loudly as presence. I interviewed staff. That's the part people always imagine as dramatic. Someone bursting into tears and confessing everything. It's never like that. It's fragments, offhand remarks, the things said when they think they're telling you all was normal and all was well. A scrub nurse in her 50s told me, "We used to file near miss reports, but they vanish, so we stopped. And why make trouble?" A med-surg nurse shrugged when I asked about alarm fatigue. "You don't run every time one goes off. If you did, you never sit down. You decide which screams matter. If you guess wrong, well," she didn't finish the sentence. A transport tech, a young guy, maybe early 20s, said, "Sometimes patients cry waking up. That's normal, right?" I asked what he meant. He shook his head. "Never mind, that's anesthesia's area." An anesthesiologist smiled too hard and told me, "Everything here is fine. The staff just needs more training." His hands were trembling when he said it. Then there was the OR tech, dark hair, tired eyes. No name badge when I saw her. She'd clipped it to her scrub pocket. "If you're looking for the truth," she said quietly, "check what's missing. not what's there. I wrote that down verbatim. On my second day, I pulled vital sheets from post-op and ICU. I started lining them up on the conference room table that they loaned me, ignoring the looks from administration. One thing jumped out right away: the handwriting. 3 different nurses supposedly charting on 12 different patients. Same rounded loops, same slanted T's, same slightly misformed 8s, even the same spacing between numbers. Nurses get busy, the chief nursing officer said when I pointed it out. On 3 floors at once? I asked. She looked at the papers, then at me, smiled like I was being precious. We're all stretched thin, Mr. Reyes. It's not ideal, but it's hardly a crime. She was right. It wasn't, by itself. That's the insidious part. Almost nothing is a crime by itself. The more records I reviewed, the more little contradictions I found. Consent forms that didn't quite match the procedure performed. OR start times documented to the minute, but no corresponding anesthesia start time. A generator test log that showed all green, while a maintenance tech told me, off the record, it failed last year and we were told not to panic anyone. He wouldn't give me his name. He did slide a folded sheet of paper across the table, old printout. It said backup generator test failed, not reported, scrawled at the bottom of an official report. I added that to my file. I requested their incident reports. The quality director assured me I was seeing everything. I've heard that line from more hospitals than I can count. Halfway through the stack, I found 2 reports with the exact same wording, copied and pasted. Different dates, different patients, same phrases. Patient tolerated procedure well, no adverse events. Minor variation in blood pressure managed per protocol. Minor variation in one case was a 30-point drop. Now that's a typo, the director said. How many typos do you get before it becomes culture? I asked. He didn't answer. The 3 biggest issues surfaced slowly, like bodies rising in murky water. The first was a wrong procedure near miss, several of them actually. I found 3 documented. A mark on the wrong limb caught early. A consent mismatch discovered in pre-op. A surgery canceled when a surgeon refused to proceed without a corrected order set. Then I started reading between the lines. One op note had a timestamp showing it was amended 7 minutes after incision. The original note had laparoscopic cholecystectomy scratched lightly underneath the added appendectomy. The consent in the chart was for appendectomy only. This team had almost performed the wrong procedure. When I asked the surgeon about it, he said, scheduling glitch, we fixed it. Before you cut? I asked. He hesitated just a beat too long. Yes. Surgery logs told a fuzzier story. Board said Cole up to 5 minutes before a knife to skin. Consent never changed. One case like that is concerning. A cluster starts to look like a system that expects humans to correct errors built into its own workflow. The second event was the generator one. Officially, it hadn't happened. There was a brief power fluctuation noted in a facilities log with no impact on patient care. Unofficially, I heard about it 3 times in whispers before I saw it on paper. The ICU charge nurse told me, ask OR3 about the lights. The OR manager told me we followed protocol, everything functioned as designed, and then corrected herself, as intended. A recovery nurse just said, we don't like talking about that night. I pulled chrono logs from every department for that date. At 2:17 a.m., every monitor in the OR stopped, documenting for 9 to 11 minutes, depending on the device. The ICU notes from that same period had a patient's oxygen saturation dropping precipitously before stabilizing. The event reporting system showed a draft that had never been submitted, referenced by an internal ID number and then overwritten. IT swore that it was corrupted. I've seen corrupted systems. They don't usually leave behind half-written sentences like emergency power failed to engage immediately, cut off mid-sentence. Sat in that conference room surrounded by printouts with gaps in them and realized I was staring at a hospital that had learned to survive by not looking directly at anything. The third pattern was anesthesia, specifically tachycardia spikes and uneventful courses. I flagged 5 cases in 1 quarter. In each, the heart rate climbed above 125 for sustained periods. In each, there were notes that could be read as benign, sympathetic response, no recall reported, no movement observed. But in 3, there were odd little details. One nurse documented a patient's eyes tearing on a sedated patient, then crossed it out and squeezed in corneal reflex above it in smaller handwriting. Another case had a note about increased gas flow, but no change in blood pressure that matched the dosage. And one chart, buried near the back of the pile, had an odd line scribbled lightly and almost erased. Patient tearful under tape. Anxious? ? There was no place in the form where a nurse could document, I think this person is awake and just can't move. No checkbox for that. When I asked the anesthesia department head if they'd had any reports of interoperative awareness, he gave me the line I've heard 100 times. People dream under anesthesia. They conflate pre-op anxiety with recall. It's rare. Has it happened here? I asked. Not to my knowledge, he said. Knowledge is a funny word. It leaves a lot of room for things you refuse to learn. By week 3, the hospital's administrators were getting restless. They wanted closure. Are we failing the survey? The CEO asked me point blank. I don't know yet, I said, which was true. You don't fail a hospital for having a power outage. You don't fail them because one surgeon almost did the wrong procedure and then caught himself. You don't pull their license because a few people had weird memories after surgery. You do fail them when you can prove they're at danger, not just that they're messy. The problem was, I was starting to feel something I'm not supposed to bring into this job. Dread. Because patterns were emerging in every direction. Backfilled charting across shifts. Sterilizer logs that skipped problem days. Incidents that staff swore they'd reported, but that never made it to the official system. Good clinicians who quietly admitted they'd stopped speaking up because what's the point? One older nurse, close to retirement, looked at me and said, "This place eats people. Patients, sure, but staff too. The ones who stay learn how not to see things. The ones who can't, they leave or they break." I asked her which she thought she was. She said both and laughed without smiling. The last straw came from somewhere I didn't expect. Patient satisfaction surveys. Most investigators don't put much weight on these. People complain about the food, the TV channels, the wait times. It's noise more than it is signal. But buried in 3 months of surveys, I found them. Lines that were useful. The nurses were kind, but I woke up in the middle of my surgery. Another said it felt like I couldn't move, but I could hear them talking. I told them something was wrong, and they said it was a dream. Not many, maybe 5 out of hundreds, but enough. One wrote, simply, "I cried, but couldn't wipe my own tears. Someone did it for me. I don't remember her name." I sat there with that comment in my hand, thinking about the OR tech's advice. Check what's missing. No incident reports attached, no follow-up. The cases were coded as unremarkable. The chart for that patient, 30s, female, elective surgery, had that same phrase at the end of the anesthesia note. It said, "Course uneventful." Her heart rate told me otherwise. In the end, what I had wasn't a smoking gun. It was 1,000 degrees of negligence. None of it alone made for a headline, but together, it was a facility where risk wasn't managed, it was reclassified. Where harm wasn't prevented, it was renamed. Where documentation was less a record of truth than a shield. We have a term for it on the forms: immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. You check that box when you believe that, if nothing changes, someone is going to get hurt or die. I checked the box. I wrote the findings: infection control failures, anesthesia oversight deficiencies, failure to maintain life safety systems, inadequate event reporting, culture contributing to underreporting of serious incidents. It sounded dry, even to me. That's the problem with our language. It can't hold the image of an old woman asking, "Am I dying?" while her nurse jokes about muting her. It can't hold the girl whose mother almost signed away the wrong organ. It can't hold 11 seconds in the dark with someone's blood oxygen dropping away like sand. It definitely can't hold the quiet horror of a patient who cries under tape while a room full of people insists she isn't there. This narrative isn't part of the official record. It won't go into the database. The system only wants numbers, not ghosts. But you asked me what I really found, so here it is. Hospitals like this don't become dangerous overnight. They erode, one overwritten timestamp at a time, one ignored alarm, one nurse deciding not to bother with another incident report that will disappear, one tech whispering, "I'm sorry," to someone who can't move. By the time someone like me shows up, the worst things have usually already happened. All I can do is name it and hope that somewhere it makes it harder for the next uneventful course to hide what it really was. Places don't fall apart all at once. They unravel through small silences and the moments when people decide it's easier not to speak. We all share responsibility for noticing when the foundations shift, when normal starts to mean harm we've learned to tolerate. If we want anything better, we have to stay awake to the spaces we move through and the systems that we rely on. Because the truth is simple and heavy. Places become what we allow them to become.